can hear me? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thanks, first of all, to the organizers, to the IDSA, to let me be part of this Asian Security Conference here in New Delhi. I want to cover with my presentation climate change adaptation as a means of crisis prevention. I think I want to focus here on a topic already mentioned a couple of times throughout this morning and also in the first afternoon session. Nevertheless, I think I will shift a little bit, or I have the feeling that I a little bit shift the perspective and not trying to bring a non-traditional security aspect to a community of geostrategic thinkers, in the, at least not in the first hand, but quite the reverse, to show practitioners and also climate politicians that how important their work is when it comes to peace and stability. And I also want to bring this very topic back a little bit to the subnational level, and to this end I will proceed in the following way. The outline of the presentation as well as the paper is a little bit is a three-step approach. First I will outline a little bit, elaborate a little bit on the challenges of climate change, crisis and conflict, also showing that there is already some political awareness for this very topic. In the second part I try to bring the adaptation community and the crisis and conflict community together in order to show where are the challenges of a conflict-sensitive approach in this regard, and also to outline a little bit what is the current status of adaptation when framed as a means to conflict and crisis prevention. And I want to bring some further ideas to this overall discussion with a tool we have developed throughout the last 2 years, the Water Crisis Climate Change Analytical Framework. I will very briefly introduce the concept and then try to show how this WACCAF can support conflict-sensitive adaptation practices. And the basis for this paper for me and also for my team at Adelphi in Berlin is mainly 3 projects. One is called Cozy Adaptation, Conflict-Sensitive Adaptation. It's a research project on behalf of the Federal Environment Agency in Germany. A second influence is the Initiative for Peace Building Early Warning Network project that is on behalf of the European Commission, and a main part of this exercise was the conceptualization and the testing of the WACCAF. And the third pillar is the overall our overall work on climate change and international security. Inter alia, we are advising the Federal Foreign Office to foster dialogue on CCIS throughout the year 2011 and also 2012. When it comes to climate change and conflict and the challenges, as well as the political awareness, I think we already have mentioned a couple of main drivers throughout this day, and I see that you try to read this map, and I realize that it will be really difficult to do so. So what it shows basically, I mean it's based on the IPCC report, and it shows that there in different sectors like the food, water, ecosystem and extreme weather events, there are we can expect different impacts of climate change depending on the temperature, the mean temperature. And you all are aware, I guess, on the discussion of 1, 2, 3, 4 degrees compared to pre-industrial levels when it comes to greenhouse gas concentrations. But what I want to indicate with this graph is that we do not wait until we are sure that we are going to a 3 or 4 degrees world, but already today we have some climate change impacts when it comes to water availability of food security that we need to take seriously, and that may be also of relevant for conflict. That this may be the case is displayed in this world map of future potential climate change-induced conflict constellations. The German Advisory Council on Global Change published this world map back in 2007, and it shows mainly 4 climate change-induced conflict constellations when it comes to degradation of freshwater resources. When it also shows that there may be examples of decline in food production, the impacts of storms and flood disasters, as well as somehow a resulting impact also increased environmentally induced migration. And there are for the future there are very different places around the world there are potential hotspots, but of course not all potential hotspots have been identified. And coming back to a question this morning about are only fragile states affected, a very good question, I think, and Cleo also presented that with respect to Hurricane Katrina we can see that is definitely not the case. Nevertheless, mainly affected states that are considered normally are fragile or unstable, or at least those countries will face huge challenges when it comes to set up and establish and expand the coping capacity needed in light of climate change. And what you can see here with the world map on climate-induced potentially climate-induced conflicts, and on the other hand a conflict map with displaying high intensity violent conflicts in 2009, that there are already a number of states in conflict situations that may be threatened by increasing climate change impacts. And at the same time, I think it's important to say that there is already a political awareness to this overall situation. You have, you find a number of quotes by UN representatives like Ban Ki-moon. Important with those 2 quotes here is that the overall climate change impacts I mentioned before are framed as reasons for increasing instability, and also adaptation is given as the main mean, including institutions for prevention, mediation, and the peaceful resolution of conflicts. And also Cristina Figueres, Executive Director of UNFCCC, organization normally not dealing with security issues, referred to the need of climate change policies in order to avoid such longevity of conflicts. So that means that we have already a debate at the UN level on climate change and security, and there were only in 2007 and 2011 debates in the Security Council. But maybe more importantly, already in 2009, Ban Ki-moon published a report outlining that climate change is not only a threat multiplier, and this is not a figure I designed last night, being tired, but this is part of the Ban Ki-moon report on climate change and security. And apart from the threat multiplier perspective, that here is of course one, and there are possible security threats on very different regional levels. There is a focus on the threat minimizers, and one of them is that of adaptation, and this can also build on some activities as part of the international climate change negotiations. This brings me to the second part of the paper and also the presentation. And coming to adaptation, I think first it's useful to outline a few concepts and meanings of the debate, at least as we are using it. Crisis more as an overall status of abrupt change occurring in an environment with unstable or complex conditions, such as the crisis in political, social, or economic affairs. And a little bit different from that is our notion of conflict here. Conflict as a relationship among 2 or more parties, whether marked by violence or not, based on actual or perceived differences in needs, interests, and goals. And the important point here is, and we did this partly in analyzing the broad body of literature on water conflicts is that we try to make a difference between different manifestations of conflicts. There are, on the one hand, verbal exchanges and diplomatic tensions, and there are confrontations like riots or damages to infrastructures, or even violent escalations. And this refers a little bit to the already mentioned work of Aaron Wolf on water incorporation and conflict. But we see that when we are talking about crisis prevention and also conflict prevention, that we need to see it as a more complex construct. The same is basically true with adaptation, and it's not, as outlined here, based on the IPCC as an adjustment in natural or human systems. We can follow a more technical view on that, and in order to address the negative consequences of climate change, such as by measures such as technology transfer or capacity building, but this maybe is not really appropriate to see what is the relevance of adaptation for crisis and conflict prevention. So we would like to argue more that adaptation as a policy field, as an evolving policy field, refers to social political transformation processes, and that has very different meanings, to be honest. One is that we are talking about adaptation as a catalyst for peaceful conflict resolution and conflict transformation. At least it can go in this direction. It may be about the redistribution of chances and resources of an entire society, and there's even the chance that with adaptation, understood as an intervention, that adaptation measures may be a potential direct cause of conflict. We also call this maladaptation. So what we need here is, when talking about adaptation and designing and implementing adaptation measures to climate change, that we need a conflict-sensitive approach, and this conflict sensitivity is a pretty established discourse as part of the international development debate. And we can have here, we have different steps. We have and with different ambitions. First is very simple to analyze and to understand the context in which one is operating, working, and intervening. Second, more ambitious understanding would be not only to understand this interaction, but to understand the interaction between one's own intervention and the context. And third would be, and this is the most ambitious, to build the capacity to act upon this understanding, to avoid on the one hand negative impacts, and on the other hand to maximize positive ones. So when we are looking at what adaptation, what is the state of adaptation also in conflict settings, as part of the international negotiations, and we did this in the second part of the paper, we see, when we take the national adaptation programs of action as an example, of course this is not the only process to come up with adaptation strategies, but it's a very central one. Then we see that 21 or 45 have been developed in countries considered as fragile states, or at least at high risk of becoming destabilized. And in a more detailed analysis, we see that also conflict triggers such as water and food scarcity, as well as the role of disasters, play a central role in this in these strategies or in these programs. But on the other hand, on the minus side, we see not all conflict-prone countries are supported in coming up with such NAPAs. There is due to a lack of funding, there's only a slow initiation of projects and only a slow establishment of appropriate governance structures in those countries, but maybe this is subject to change. A lack of coherency of adaptation with other political processes, and there is a focus on the national level and less on the local or on the transboundary level. This is true, for example, for the water sector. Last but not least, there's an unclear degree of participation by affected stakeholder groups, also one aspect very important for conflict-sensitive adaptation. What are the challenges? There are a couple. 3 I want to highlight out of these 5, because I will address them with the third part of the presentation. First, there's a need to that all sectors critically affected by climate change must be identified. Second, having government and non-governmental stakeholders work together to identify risks and formulate strategies and programs. And third, there's a need to significantly expand the political scope for adaptation measures and substantially increase the capacity to do so. And we want to suggest, with the so-called water crisis climate change analytical framework, that we can help at least to address some of these challenges. We outline in the paper how we try to address or how to use WACCAF as a means for conflict-sensitive adaptation. The main objective here is that we want to understand and analyze the complex interaction between water in this case, but you can expand it to the other conflict drivers as well, and internal crisis and conflict potentials with a special focus on climate change. And this can you can use it by through our training and capacity building exercises, also in the field of adaptation. And that means that it can be used on the one hand as a conflict analysis or an environmental peace building analysis tool, but on the other hand, you can also use it to develop recommendations or to guide strategies and projects. And in a nutshell, we have this WACCAF here in trying to help us to outline the conflict potential between water users and our water manager groups, with mainly 3 influencing factors, also influencing the water access and water availability, with a special focus on one aspect we consider as very important for the potential for conflict, that is marginalization of specific user groups. And we also try to consider context factors like the role of existing or previous conflicts with this tool, and also the transboundary and international dimension. And on the other hand, there's a need to outline the opportunities for cooperation as part of such a analytical framework. That means that we need to try to find new entry points for cooperation in already established institutions, and also try to analyze, develop conflict resolution mechanisms as part of adaptation. So there are 6 steps to applying this WACCAF. The first is mainly to have the first 2 to mainly defining the scope of your analysis and choosing a region, and also to identify the major water user groups and what is their relation and what is their dependence on water. This can be for income, for food security, for pure domestic needs, but also for cultural value. And the third step refers to the analysis of water availability and access, making a difference between water management and ecosystem management, and trying to distinguish between those setting the rules, allocate water and collect the tariffs, and those maybe for other purposes like ecosystems services or mining operations, using groundwater resources in a negative way. And a third factor is that of climate change, with changing precipitation patterns, but also with saltwater intrusion as a consequence of flooding events. So the fourth of 6 steps is I already mentioned this, the analysis of the broader context, when we try to bring in aspects of broader marginalization like ethnic and gender questions, and we try to facilitate this part of the analysis by a typology of water conflicts, between very different user groups. And I think we already heard today some of the overall conflict constellations, for example, between different agricultural users, between pastoralists and farmers, but also regions within the same country. We referred in the panel before to the Kaveri River as another example, and also between water managers and water users affected by large infrastructure projects like dam construction is an important aspect in this regard. So fifth and the sixth step is to bring that to all things together and identify the potential for cooperation, conflict resolution and prevention, and what here and try to outline what is the role for adaptation processes and how needs institution and cooperation mechanisms needs to be designed in order to reduce conflict potentials, and what are there other ways how we can change the incentive structures to foster cooperation. We applied this last year here in Andhra Pradesh in Rajamundry in a testing in India with some key recommendations we may also see as quite generic, but nevertheless they are, I think, important in all. I think also today we mentioned some of them, like the joint monitoring and planning on climate change impacts and water data, or the strengthening and adapting of water management institution. Promoting education and training is one key aspect in this regard. This brings me to my conclusions. On the one hand, the state of play of adaptation when it comes also to adaptation in conflict-prone regions. I think we can say that decision makers, policy planners, and also practitioners have started to consider adaptation as a policy field that can contribute to crisis prevention. Nevertheless, there is no regular peace and conflict assessment on the overall impact of adaptation measures, and the institutionalization of adaptation in general is at all levels still in the beginning. We would recommend that adaptation processes should be based on participatory processes, linking all different regional levels, and also include marginalized groups. And we think WACCAF can help to identify sectors and can be a kind of guidance in this regard. When it comes to challenges and needs, I think, and that was also a result of the panel before, that there's a huge need to improve the information base on climate change in general, but also on climate change and conflict, by conducting assessments not only top down but also bottom up, and try to link that, and also to build robust governance structures linking very different levels. We talked pretty much on the national level and also on the transboundary throughout the day, but I think also to link that with the experience on the local level is important. And I think those challenges and needs give us some food to enter in a discussion later on. So I want to thank you.